This video is sponsored by Nord VPN.
It may be the most addictive toy in history, and it's definitely the hottest thing this Christmas. Nintendo video games. Now millions of American kids are hooked and mesmerized. When they do stop to talk, it's in a language only they understand.
I have to live with my kids for the rest of the year, so I have to have this on Christmas Day.
Video games. They are as American, well, as international as war. We've got that too. In 1981, Americans popped in between $5 and $9 billion worth of quarters and tokens into the slots of arcade video games.
Electronics is changing so rapidly. And with each change in electronics, it brings something new. So this is not a passing fad.
Never has there been an opening like this in the entertainment industry. This week, Grand Theft Auto 5 pulled in $1 billion in sales in 3 days. No movie or music release has ever come close to that.
While the mall may be desolate, consumers still can't get enough video games as part of their new stay-at-home economy.
How big a hit is this?
This is as big or bigger than anything the toy industry has ever seen.
If you watch my channel, you know that I've made a few videos speaking out against Rockstar Games. Doing so would typically keep me up at night, as Take-Two has been known to send private investigators in real life to modders' houses for making mods. But I can rest easy knowing that I've got Nord VPN. I use Nord VPN to protect myself from Rockstar, hackers, and websites. Now that I have Nord VPN, I no longer have to upload my videos using the local McDonald's or Starbucks Wi-Fi. Because as far as Rockstar is concerned, I'm in Japan, now India, now Brazil, now Arabia. All jokes aside, using public Wi-Fi is a sin. You shouldn't be doing it. You should be using NordVPN. Anyone with the most rudimentary hacking ability can access your information if you're sharing the same network. NordVPN protects you from hackers when you're online by encrypting your data and masking your IP. Basically, no one knows who you are, where you are, or what you're looking at. GTA Online modders can literally open their menu and find your IP and do whatever they want with it, like DDoSing you. Because Rockstar doesn't care about protecting you, NordVPN does. Your privacy and safety is important. Consider protecting yourself with NordVPN and supporting the channel. You can try it for 30 days with their money-back guarantee. Go to nordvpn.com/darkspacevpn for a great discount. The link is also below. How big are video games? In 2020, the gaming industry generated $155 billion in revenue. That averages to more than $424 million a day. But the gaming industry wasn't always this profitable.
Sega introduces Spider-Man with real web-slinging action.
For comparison, in 2004, the gaming industry generated more than $25 billion. If you adjust for inflation, that's almost $37 billion, or $101 million a day. Rockstar Games' GTA franchise is known for its massive success. By the time San Andreas was released, GTA 3 had sold 11 million, and Vice City had sold 13 million copies globally. When GTA 4 was released, San Andreas had racked up 21.5 million copies sold. That's only a span of 3.5 years. Then, almost 5.5 years later, GTA 5 was released. At that point, GTA 4 had sold 25 million copies. The GTA player base was excited. In the first 3 days of GTA 5's release, they broke records with over 1 billion in sales.
How big of a deal is Grand Theft Auto? Opening day sales for the 5th installment of the video game surpassed, wait for it, $800 million. That's more than the top 4 biggest box office opening weekends of all time combined.
This was 4 times greater than the cost of development. Since that successful release in 2013, GTA 5 has gone on to sell more than 155 million copies, earning over $6 billion in revenue. In August of 2021, the most profitable console game was Call of Duty Warzone, practically printing money with on average $3,633 per minute. That's $1.91 billion in 1 year from its 100 million players. In second place was FIFA 20 with $2,054 per minute, and GTA Online in third with $1,733 per minute. In 2020, League of Legends reportedly generated $1.75 billion in revenue. On average, that's $3,330 a minute. League of Legends claims to have had 180 million monthly players in October of 2021. However, they're counting people twice if they access 2 of their games based in the League of Legends universe within the month. To put this into perspective, in 1 year, Warzone made nearly double what Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker made in theaters. Movies have been the epitome of the entertainment industry since the beginning, but that's just not the case anymore. The entire global film industry market value amounts to $41.7 billion. The global gaming market is valued at $173.7 billion. The largest blockbuster films of all time are far less impressive from a money standpoint in comparison to some video games. Movies such as Avatar, Titanic, and even Avengers Endgame didn't make as much money in theaters as GTA 5 did. It would take 2 Endgames to equal 1 GTA 5. Before the main console lineup we see today got started, Nintendo was the titan in charge of the in-home console market.
Nintendo video games.
They line up at the few stores that have been able to get copies of the hottest Nintendo games.
Sony and Microsoft hadn't even joined. Nintendo was leading the market with consoles like the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Entertainment System. In 1998, Sony had begun working with Nintendo to create the Super Disc. They wanted to enter the video game market and chose to work with Nintendo, the market leader of the time. In 1991, Sony introduced a modified version of the Super Disc as part of their new game console, the PlayStation. The following day, Nintendo announced that they were going to use Philips instead of Sony for the Super Disc. The Super Disc was never introduced or used by Nintendo. Sony joined the console race at the end of 1994 with the release of the PlayStation in Japan. In September 1995, it was released in America. Both releases were met with critical acclaim. The Nintendo 64 released on June 23, 1996, and went on to sell 33 million units in its lifetime. By the end of the PlayStation 1's run, it had sold 102.5 million units worldwide, tripling the Nintendo 64 sales and making it the winner of the 5th console generation. The 6th console generation was the first to see Microsoft join in. The first console to release in this generation was the PlayStation 2 on March 4, 2000, and worldwide by November 30, 2000. The PlayStation 2 was extremely popular. The console released a full year before its competitors, making them the exclusive console to play games like GTA 3, Silent Hill 2, Final Fantasy X, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Gran Turismo 3, and Devil May Cry. The GameCube and Xbox showed up late to the party, as they weren't available worldwide until 2002. The PlayStation 2 was the only console that could play a DVD without needing to buy a DVD movie playback kit. The console had backwards compatibility to play PlayStation 1 games, and more exclusives than Xbox. The Xbox, released on November 15th, 2001, had one of the greatest exclusives of all time, Halo. Nintendo released the GameCube a day earlier on November 14th, 2001. By the end of this run, Sony had sold 155 million PlayStation 2 units. Microsoft had sold 24 million Xbox units, and Nintendo had sold 21,740,000 GameCube units. The 7th generation was Microsoft's chance at a year-long lead against Sony and the PlayStation. The Xbox 360 was released on November 22, 2005. It sold 84 million units during its run. A year later, the PlayStation 3 came out on November 11, 2006. It ended up selling 87.4 million units. The Wii was released in the same month, and the Wii sold 101.63 million units in total. The 7th generation brought Nintendo back to the forefront and out of Microsoft and Sony's shadows. In November of 2010, Microsoft launched the Kinect, which never really had great development support when it comes to games. It managed to sell 35 million units. The 8th generation consisted of the Wii U, released on November 18, 2012, which sold 13.56 million units. A year later, the PlayStation 4, released on November 15, 2013, which sold 116.6 million units, and the Xbox One, released on November 22, 2013, selling 51 million units. Microsoft majorly fumbled the Xbox One. The Xbox One was marketed more like a television box than a console. They also pushed for always-on DRM and went so far as to say that if you didn't like it, you could go play the Xbox 360.
Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360, that's your message if you don't, like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously.
Did you know or did you anticipate that people were going to push back the way they did online?
Absolutely.
Recently, Don kind of, made a comment about, internet. Have you heard of that? Basically said, if you can't buy an Xbox One with internet, then, why don't you just buy a 360? You know what I'm saying? But people who don't have, good internet connections in rural areas or, for example, other countries or military bases.
Have you looked at the specs on it? Because we're actually very clear about, hey, it's a connected console, right?
But it limits it quite a bit.
But it doesn't. It actually doesn't limit it.
So what about for users who just don't want to, have this DRM and be forced to buy the Kinect and different? What do you say to those people that don't have a good internet connection that want to buy an Xbox 360? Just like they asked the same question to Don.
Sure, I can say that when you say you don't have a good internet connection, you just need you could use a mobile. You could tether to your phone.
But you guys also have the option to disable. I know it's very simple to disable the 24-hour check-in.
Do you? Are you on the development team? Okay, so I think that's a little bold of you to say it's simple.
Sony seemed to understand what people wanted, and even made jokes at Xbox's expense about being able to play used games. Gamers were sold, and the PlayStation 4 went on to more than double the sales of the Xbox One. The Nintendo Switch was released in March of 2017 and has sold 92.87 million units to date, so Nintendo came back from their misfire and nearly doubled the Xbox One sales. The 9th and current generation is difficult to fairly judge sold units, as it's nearly impossible to get your hands on one. The Xbox Series X and S were released in November 10th, 2020. They have sold 6 million units to date. The PlayStation 5 digital and disc versions were released on November 12th, 2020. They have sold 13.4 million units to date. Microsoft has sold 165 million consoles to date. Since the Nintendo 64, Nintendo has sold 262.73 million consoles to date. Sony has sold 474.89 million consoles to date. Sony has sold almost 500 million consoles. The best-selling console of all time is the PlayStation 2, with 155 million units sold. The worst-selling console in this time frame, not counting the current generation, was the Wii U, with only 13.56 million units sold. In total, worldwide, these consoles amount to 937,620,000 units. There are almost a billion consoles from Generation 5 to now produced on this planet. Did you know that companies almost always lose money on console sales? As a recent example, we can look at the Epic versus Apple trial, where Microsoft's head of business development at Xbox was asked, "How much margin does Microsoft earn on the sale of the Xbox consoles?" She responded, "We don't. We sell consoles at a loss." She elaborated further when pressed and explained how they make money through Xbox Live and Xbox Gamepass. When asked if Microsoft has ever earned a profit on the sale of an Xbox device, Wright said no. Xbox has never profited from their Xbox sales. Sony, for instance, took years to stop losing money on PlayStation 3 sales, but only 6 months after its release in 2013, the PlayStation 4 stopped selling at a loss. Selling these consoles at a loss in order to make money on accessories, subscriptions, games, and more is a strategy known as a loss leader. Here are the top 5 highest grossing games for many popular consoles. These are the companies that these games belong to. Studios like Take-Two show up on this list several times thanks to Rockstar Games' Grand Theft Auto series. Of all these companies, it seems like PlayStation and Nintendo understand how to make video games the most. EA makes monetization models disguised as video games. Activision makes AAA games, but on somewhat of an assembly line. Take-Two follows the money, but usually gives great content to make up for their monumental greed. Xbox half understands what it takes to make good games, but they've spent so much time and money going and buying studios like Bethesda, and they don't have very many quality titles to show for it yet. At least they're trying to compete with Sony. Microsoft has 23 first-party game studios compared to Sony's 13. On the other hand, EA is known for killing studios that they buy, either by ending them or turning them into mediocrity. Studios like Pandemic, Black Box, and Visceral Games are all gone now, thanks to EA. Those developers made classics like Battlefront and Dead Space. Ubisoft is an interesting company. They're widely known for their downgrades and overselling their games. Many of their games are packed with content, but still seem to feel repetitive with yearly releases, reminiscent of Activision's conveyor belt-styled release schedule. To show the stark contrast between PlayStation Studios and Activision, from 2000 to 2014, it was Activision who had exclusive rights to publish Spider-Man games. Instead of respecting the awesome privilege they had to exclusively make great Spider-Man games, they put out awful, broken products. In the beginning, they did do it right though, with Spider-Man 2. Compare The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to what Insomniac delivered when they took over in 2014 and started developing Spider-Man exclusively for PlayStation 4. After this game went on to be one of the best games ever made, Sony bought Insomniac and started working with them to make Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, and Wolverine. That's a sign of a company that understands the source material and treats it appropriately. All of these are games that follow the games-as-a-service business model. This model allows for monetization in video games, either after its initial sale or to support a free-to-play model. League of Legends has nearly 180 million active players, generating a revenue of $1.75 billion in 2020. It's a free game. Comparatively, a game you have to buy, Spider-Man on PS4, has sold 20 million copies, grossing $1.2 billion in sales. Looking at these two, you'd think that they're nearly equal, but the money League made was digital. The $1.2 billion in gross sales doesn't mean Insomniac and Sony walked away with all that money. In 2018, more than half of console sales were still happening at retail, and retail is entirely different than digital when it comes to game sales. For every disc sold, it's estimated that the retailer accounts for $25 to $30 of the sale. The cost to make the case and disc comes to $3 to $5. The cost of shipping and distribution is $1 to $2. Finally, the marketing relative to each disc comes to $3 to $5. This leaves anywhere from $3 to $10 for Insomniac and about $8 for Sony, the game's publisher. Digital sales are totally different, as the digital distributor gets an $18 cut. Marketing can still amount to about $3 to $5 per sale, and the developer gets anywhere from $4 to $12 off each sale. This leaves Sony, the publisher, with $25 in profit as opposed to $8. As Sony is its own digital distributor, in this case they also make the $18. Games like League are doing away with the past. You used to buy a game in a store one time and own it and play it completely with no catch. These days, many games have an upfront cost, but also immediately find ways to get you to pay to unlock things that are already in the game you just bought. EA is the worst at this. If you want to see the then CEO John Riccitiello, I don't know how to pronounce it, and he's not really deserving of a proper introduction anyway. If you want to see what the then CEO thinks about microtransactions, I'm putting a link into one of his speeches in the description, where he basically says he can take advantage of gamers once they're invested in a game. He says that when a player is in the middle of a fight and they need to reload, if they charge $1 to reload, the player isn't very price sensitive in that moment. Free games are the highest earning video games. In 2020, they made $98.4 billion. Apex Legends, a game published by EA, has made $1.6 billion in revenue. That's $1.6 billion for cosmetics. Fortnite has made over $9 billion in 2018 and 2019. $9 billion for cosmetics. In 2020, in America, McDonald's made $7.66 billion. That's $7.66 billion for real-life food versus $9 billion for some pixels on a screen. You could buy 118,000 Tesla Model Ys and give everybody in Greenland 2 of them with that profit. The Xbox Game Pass Ultimate is $15 a month. and according to Microsoft, it has around 18 million subscribers. That adds up to $270 million per month and $3.2 billion a year. But what they're actually making depends on the tier the subscribers have. On top of this, Microsoft has surpassed 100 million active users on their platform, but it's unclear how many of those users are paying for Xbox Live subscriptions. PlayStation, on the other hand, has 3.2 million PS Now members and 47.6 million Plus members. That's, lowest bet, $2.85 billion from PS Plus, or double that at best based on what plan customers choose. And that's anywhere from $129 million to $260 million for the PlayStation Now yearly revenue. To compare, Netflix has roughly 209 million global paid memberships. Some of the big games we purchase fail to deliver a basic level of quality. Sometimes they're not even playable. Some notorious offenders include Cyberpunk and GTA Definitive Edition. Cyberpunk made back its development and marketing costs from pre-orders alone. Even unfinished games, ones that are truly disappointing, end up making a profit. Cyberpunk, released in December of 2020, sold 13.7 million copies in the first 3 weeks, generating over $800 million in sales, and the refunds barely affected this. During its opening quarter in 2017, Mass Effect Andromeda sold more than 2.5 million units, resulting in an estimated $110 million in revenue. Star Wars Battlefront 2 fell short of EA's expected 10 million copies, which of course was blamed on the Loot Crate controversy. It still managed to sell 9 million copies within 2 months, generating approximately $540 million in sales. A concerningly high percentage of games lose money. Even games from AAA studios aren't safe from this difficult market. Marvel's Avengers from Square Enix sold about 3 million copies. It cost them $100 million to produce the game, resulting in a net loss of about $63 million. 90% of games fail because they take extreme amounts of time and money to create, only to be faced with fierce competition and an audience that may not even be interested. The general audience is only interested in the familiar, the mainstream, your Call of Duties, Battlefields, and Halos. Games like Avengers fall flat because they're poorly designed and they're unfinished. While some games get what they deserve, with poor sales and diminishing player bases, some still profit billions while being unfinished and far from perfect. But how is that possible? Because these massive companies have figured it out. Most games don't have the quality that a Rockstar game has, the attention to detail, the world building. Is this because other studios can't handle such a project? Not at all. It's because they refuse to take the time to create something meaningful and rich, full of character. They have a deadline and they need to push something out quickly so they can rush to the next project. It's like they don't realize taking their time to deliver a special product is worthwhile. EA is probably the worst offender. EA has complete exclusivity over NFL games. The agreement allows EA, and only EA, to make official NFL video games featuring NFL players, teams, and stadiums. You'd think that having such a privileged opportunity would inspire dedication to doing the best possible job, but EA doesn't think much of this privilege. They don't upgrade these games annually or add any features that the player base has been asking for. Instead, they milk the NFL trademark and basically re-release the same game with new repackaging, even at times with downgrades. Despite Madden 21 being overwhelmingly despised with a user score of 0.2 on Metacritic, EA reports that it has sold 20% more copies in the first week than Madden 20 did. In fact, despite the Madden games essentially being routinely copy-pasted products, Madden 21 is the 21st consecutive Madden franchise launch to top the best-selling games chart during its respective launch month. What's even crazier is Madden NFL 21 was the best-selling game in August of 2020, even though it was released at the end of the month on August 28th. They outsold Ghost of Tsushima. The Madden NFL franchise has sold more than 250 million copies in total since 1988. That's at least $15 billion in generated sales. The unfortunate reality is that we reward companies that do a substandard job with good money. I personally would never pre-order a game, period, unless it's made by an indie studio or a studio that I truly believe in. If Cyberpunk already made a profit off of pre-orders, They probably felt more of an obligation to release at the scheduled time, and they didn't feel as much pressure to put out a polished game that would merit the sales because they already had them. This is why modern games get released in unfinished states on day one, requiring patch after patch to get them operational. This would never fly in the old days, when discs were printed and shipped without the crutch of internet patches for short-sighted game studios to exploit. Anthem sold less than 6 million copies in a month. SuperData reported that the game had earned over $100 million in digital revenue in February of 2019, of which $3.5 million came from in-game purchases. It's been admitted that this game was not working as planned at keeping players engaged, but that BioWare would continue to support the title. They've since gone back on this and completely shut down support for Anthem. Although appearing small in comparison to console and PC revenue, mobile games have exponentially growing sales rates. In October of 2021, it was reported that across the App Store and Google Play, player spending generated $7.5 billion. Topping the charts in terms of sales is Honor of Kings, an online multiplayer game published by Tencent Games. Yes, that Tencent. They made this game because their subsidiary, Riot Games, has had so much success with League of Legends. Inspired by that money, they made a similar game for mobile. It was released on November 26, 2015, and has earned over $13 billion. Honor of Kings' popularity is still rising. During 2020, they had 25 million new downloads and claimed to have 100 million daily active users. Other mobile games generating billions include Monster Strike, Puzzle & Dragons, Clash of Clans, and Pokemon Go. All of these games are free to download, following a free-to-play model. Players are encouraged to download and play the game for free, but of course, are marketed the option to purchase items that will enhance their gameplay. Games like Raid Shadow Legends follow this model. Speaking of Raid Shadow Legends, this video is not sponsored by them. It's sponsored by Nord VPN, remember? But if you're wondering how Raid Shadow Legends is able to sponsor so many people on YouTube, it's likely because it's earned more than $570 million in revenue over its lifetime. By not having a hefty initial cost, these games are easily accessible to a vast audience, which in turn increases the likelihood of profits from microtransactions. Amazon and Google are even getting involved in gaming. They offer users the ability to stream games through their phones and other devices. Although Stadia isn't very popular, since it's being funded by Google, they can afford to invest in its success for the future, despite its failures today. It's possible that the future of gaming will start including mobile into the pot, as they'll be able to stream current-gen games seamlessly with advancements like 5G. According to Statista, there are more than 6 billion smartphone users as of 2021, so it's a massive market to tap into. The top 5 grossing mobile games are Honor of Kings, a League of Legends-esque game with $13.12 billion gross revenue. Monster Strike, a monster slingshot game with $9.6 billion gross revenue. Puzzle & Dragons, a puzzle battle game with $8.2 billion gross revenue. Clash of Clans, a base defender game with $7.7 billion gross revenue. And Pokemon Go, a Pokemon collecting and battling game with $7.25 billion gross revenue. Statista estimates that there are 3.24 billion gamers around the world. There are 7.75 billion people in the world, so almost half the planet is playing games. In 2015, there were only 2 billion gamers worldwide. The further you turn the clock back, the less and less popular gaming is. But with that came a naive industry. An industry set on breaking new ceilings and improving their technologies, growing and providing something new to its users. Risks were higher, the market was new, and the technology wasn't completely there. But as time went on, greed infected the industry. Companies like EA didn't see the players as customers. They saw them as mere tools that needed manipulating, money that needed milking. What used to be an innocent and small industry has now grown into something bigger than anything else on the planet. Products are created and churned out on a conveyor belt, with the same engines, titles, and graphics year after year, and gamers eat it up. Passion, creativity, and integrity all seem to be things of the past. We see this with companies like Activision and Bungie smearing common ethics and fostering awful workplace culture. We feel it when we buy a new game and play it, but are met with bugs and glitches. when it's clear that the game was released in an unplayable state just to meet a deadline. We've seen amazing companies like Rockstar Games go from releasing the best games on the planet to games like the Definitive Edition. These companies release unfinished games, treat their employees horribly, treat the customers horribly, and they make billions of dollars. But they aren't the only ones who make money. They don't always get away with awful monetization schemes. Although much of our voice has recently been taken away from us, we still define each and every game's success. We vote with our wallets. These companies don't listen to comments or dislikes or morality anyways. They listen to our wallets. So speak with your wallets. The game industry may be massive, but it's not massive because of these companies. It's massive because of us.